Welcome, everyone, to another episode of FitFam. This is Miss Natural Olympia 4 times. Oh, Hilary.
This is Dier, Formulator.
We say that because we just come back from Olympia, and Hilary won her 4th Masters. Congratulations.
Thank you. That was
Pro figure.
It was a crazy weekend.
It was so awesome.
It was so awesome.
Also won the Pro Classic figure
Right.
division. Came home with 2 gold medals.
2 gold medals at Natural Olympia is a pretty big win for us, I think.
That is huge.
I think also it was I went in with a little bit different mentality this time, and so to come out with 2 wins when I was kind of okay with, I really felt okay with however it was going to turn out, because I felt like I was bringing a pretty great package. And so I don't know, it was a strange feeling all weekend. I've never experienced a win that felt it felt just different for me,
So it's great. It was definitely deserved. There's 37 countries final count there.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
really good.
And for the first time ever in the open division, we had to be split into open and tall. There were so many of us.
Short and tall, yeah.
Sorry, short and tall, which is kind of cool, and came in 3rd there too. So
Yeah, and you got to
second
compete
year in a row.
on stage with your daughter in pro figure. Well, I
Yeah,
guess
I
she was in the tall, you were in the short. But you're in the same division, right?
We were in the same division, and
That
she
was
was phenomenal, and it was
She
a crazy great
she looked
weekend.
really great. Really great. Well, good. Well, hey, it's good to be back for
Good
a
to be
short
back.
time.
Yeah.
And we're back on the road again. A lot going on with the fight against the great American food fraud. I hope you're following along and supporting us in that cause. But today we're going to take a little bit of a turn and go back to something that's near and dear to me. But I think even the longer we're married, it becomes so apparent with our family and our friends and our children and things like that.
Yeah, I think it's always kind of been something that you've been very passionate about and very into and studying. And I think in more recent years, I think I've more kind of caught on and understood what it's all about. And we're talking about frequencies. So
Frequencies, energy, things like that. Some people will talk about it in the form of numbers, others in music and just regular frequencies, but it all is the same. It's basically understanding that there's vibes, that there's energy in the universe, and
all life has energy.
all life has energy,
Mhm.
and the importance of that. And I think that what I wanted to do is talk about that from your perspective, my perspective for a little bit, so that the audience can see why it's important. Because it's one thing like, oh, you're going to go off on this subject, but really, what does it do for me? Or why is it important to understand energies and frequencies and all this stuff in your life? And there's a lot of reasons.
Yeah, I think so. I think also universal energy, and kind of where, you know what I mean, where uh, humanity is putting their energy towards, and that kind of thing. So I think it's great to understand energy and frequency, and on both a micro level and a macro level. So
Absolutely. And I think that's a good point too, because a lot of people will call energy, universal energy, different things,
Mhm.
right? We can call it the spirit from our religious beliefs. It can be universal energy, right? It can be Earth's energy.
Mhm.
There's a lot of different ways to look at it. And so we're not here to talk like religion and say, well, energy is God, because God would have energy, obviously, but it's more from the standpoint of just living here and the energy that we can tap into to make our life happier and healthier and more beneficial. And I think from a big perspective, so that everyone can understand, it kind of comes back to what when we're raising our kids, you talk to the most successful people in the world, they all say the same thing, right?
Yeah. Are you talking about the top 5 people that
Yeah.
you surround yourself with? Yeah. So is it Jim Rohn?
He's one coined it, I think, the most. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you'll be able to kind of predict your life depending on those 5 people that you spend the most time with. You'll kind of transfer energies,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so, that's why, when our kids were growing up, and even now when we talk to each other, and maybe one of us is feeling a different way, it's also looking at not just our environment, but who is in our environment, and, what energies we're drawing from. So.
Absolutely. And it's so true. I mean, there's times when we'll know people and they say, well, I've just come back from talking to so and so, and we know where their energy is going to be because that's what they brought back with them. And I think that obviously, as you mentioned with our children, that who they hang out with. We have a couple clients and people I know that said I would take and move my entire business, my entire home, and everything if it meant I would be able to make sure my kids were around people and friends with the right frequency. Like if they saw a connection there and they wouldn't be able to help their child see that, they'd just move. That it's that important. And so that's one way to really understand that. And the other thing, besides the 5 people you hang out with and that being important, it also goes to a deeper level, even with health. And there's a old time guy that anyone in our business in the holistic field knows of, Rife. His name was Dr. Rife. And Dr. Rife supposedly, I want to get into the arguments on it, put together a machine that was able to determine the frequencies of each organ in the body and tissue in the body and what they should be to have optimal health. And he was able to, with that machine, tune in to help organs and tissues heal and regenerate by just that frequency. And he was so scorned. And even to this day, people say they kind of create machines like that, been thrown in jail and that. But what's interesting is now modern medicine, it's okay, and they should be using it, and they do. They're using a lot of these frequencies in major surgeries to be able to. They found out that the patient's calmer, the tissues will heal faster. There's less trauma during and after the surgeries. We've learned in training that they've done studies on different people with exercise, even like the different music, different tunes, different vibrations. So
that's why Doug's always trying to play certain frequencies in the gym. We've got frequencies going in our manufacturing.
Yeah, that's a good point. Down where we make all the whole food vitamins and that, we have frequencies being infused in them. Then we call them esophageal frequencies. So I think that really that's the understanding we're hoping everyone gets is like, hey, it's important to understand about frequencies just from the standpoint of being able to make decisions that might better your health and your life. And if none of that resonated with you, I think everyone's walked in a room somewhere and they felt an energy.
Yeah, whether a really great energy or neutral energy or kind of a darker energy, right? I remember Doug loves concerts and he just and he loves rock and roll and I do too for the most part. And I remember years and years ago we went to a concert and we walked in, and I've been to many concerts, but we walked in and we stayed maybe 10 minutes because the energy there was a bit dark for me. And
I think both at the same time, we're just like, this isn't
yeah, it just didn't feel,
it didn't resonate with
it
us.
didn't resonate. And so we left immediately.
And so I think we've all been in that before, and even not in a bad sense. When you go to church, you'll feel an energy there. Hopefully a sense of love. Or some people, you'll go
Or
places or
homes,
homes. Yeah, like if people talk the difference between a home and a house,
right?
right? And you
Right.
feel that and stuff. So, anyways, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about that frequency, that energy that you put off, and you are able to take in also from other people. And the key with that is it's also what you attract. And so many of the great leaders of our time and past times have always said, don't worry about trying to attract a person. Be somebody that person's attracted to. Be the frequency, be the energy that will attract the things that you want. And you got to be that type of person to begin with.
I think also remembering that whatever energy you're expelling, whatever energy you're producing, you are attracting. So being aware of your energy and your mindset and where your thinking is going is really important. I can think of many times in our lives when I've been grouchy or just focusing on the wrong thing that we just talk about, well, where's the energy?
That's it. Never grouchy, yes.
Such a smart guy.
No, and I think that's the communication, right? Being able to communicate about that. And where's that energy coming from? Where's those thoughts and feelings coming
So
from?
do you want to get into, you got this from Wayne Dyer's, right?
Yeah, so there's a lot of people that have studied this deeply. My favorite, obviously, is Nikola Tesla. And Tesla said, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And there's a lot of people that have taken that and put numbers to it. And there's different groups all the way back from the Egyptians that have put numbers to a frequency. In other words, if you're at a certain number, that's a level of frequency, and these are the things you're going to attract. This is who you are. And Wayne Dyer, one of the greatest thought leaders before social media, so not everyone knows about Wayne Dyer. Guy's a stud. Really took that information and made it as simple as possible to understand. I have a few books that are pretty intense that I read, and I've ever referred to people to read a few times, and it was just too much because it was so in depth and intense and getting into it. But Wayne Dyer was able to put it in a way to explain it, and I think that's what we want to do today is just to explain the different levels. And some you might be able to see where you're at or where you've been at different times in your life and say, okay, my next level up is this. I'm going to practice having this type of thoughts and energy and start working your way up. And just to kind of lay the foundation, we'll get into it, is that frequencies can be feelings, they can be numbers, and we're going to base it off numbers. Basically, your words have weight. I'm really big on words, really big.
big on words.
And so that's why I'm not a fan of swearing and things like that, is because words have weight. And there's a book by Dan Brown called The Lost Symbol. Highly recommend you read The Lost Symbol.
Can I just say something though? I think sometimes with swearing, I think you have a super like negative energy towards it, where somebody else could have a less negative energy because in all reality, it's just words that people have put meaning to, correct?
Mhm.
Yeah. So I'm just
So I remember day one, I walked into the Phoenix Suns locker room and came from a place where you'd hear stuff once in a while, but not at that level where it was like every other word. And it really set me back. And one of the players who also didn't swear said, "Hey, listen, you're going to find people where that's how they're raised, and their words that they're using is the language, is their language, and that word that you're hearing, you're taking one way." It's just
Right.
language to them. In other words, that's just right. It means something different than how you're taking it because you come from a place when people said it, the F-bomb or different things. They're like, it was really bad. So that you taking that energy from a word that's not the energy. Listen to the energy, listen to the feeling. And so it has helped over time to hear people and get a read, at least for me, to say, okay, that they're just speaking, and that is
Yeah,
their way
because
versus trying to impress people and saying it. And
but
then
I
it's
just
very
feel like
offensive.
sometimes if you're closed off and you think the F word, for example, just has such a negative energy. I've been in rooms with people speaking that use the F word, and I feel energized and ready to move forward and attack things, in a positive way. And so I just think that we should move on because we're going to disagree about the
That's all
feeling.
right, and basically what we can agree on is how you take it,
Yeah,
right?
how you
That
take
type
it
thing.
and what is being so it's how you take it, but it's also how they're meaning it.
That's true too. That's true. And I think my upbringing was, obviously from my dad, it's like it determines your IQ,
And I just highly disagree with everybody who says that. So
So
anyways,
basically, what we're doing right now is we're saying there's a scale that lists numbers, and we're starting at 20 and we go up to 1,000. And each of those numbers represents a different frequency, a different energy. And I think as you hear them, you're going to say, oh, this is about where I'm at. And be honest about it.
yeah,
And you can go up and down in the day, you can go up and down in an hour,
yeah.
but most of us can say this is about our
Where
middle ground.
or where I'm trying to operate,
Right.
where I'm striving to operate. And
Yeah.
I think like when we were talking about this morning and we did it through text and Slack, and when I was watching, because you have been into this much longer than I have, but when I was watching the YouTube video, um, or listening to it as I was driving, as he was going through the numbers, there were some that emotionally I almost, broke out into tears because they struck such a chord in me. And so I think you can recognize where you're at and where you're striving to be. And I think something else to say really quickly, because when you used to talk about frequencies and numbers with me, I would kind of get offended, or I would kind of resist.
Right.
And I think something that you told me a long time ago is that we're not talking about higher or lower on a ladder. We're talking about,
Yeah.
well, how do you say that?
So it's straight across the board, right?
Yeah.
And so um, that's so true. And actually, that's where I was thinking we're on the same frequency, to be able to say is that even though the numbers, people will take the numbers, and this way we're going like 20, 30, 50, you're thinking, oh, this person's a higher level, like they're a better person. And they might be showing qualities that maybe is a better version of themselves. But the way frequencies work is it is linear, it is straight across the board. And so you're not better than someone if you're at a frequency in that. You're just living at a higher plane,
Mhm.
right? But it doesn't make you better than them. And I
Right.
think that that's important to understand. And I think the people that are living at the highest plane, again, highest number, not necessarily above them, type, um, understand that better than the people at the
Oh,
lower levels.
100%.
And they understand that we're all
And
one.
we'll understand that as we go through
Sure.
and explain it.
Let's do it. So let's
Okay.
start.
Okay, so on the number scale, he was talking about 20, and that frequency is equal to shame. And the emotion that is attached to shame is humiliation. The view of life is misery. And then the God view is despising.
Right. So your picture, what you think God is this being and that despises you, right?
Mhm.
And put you here and putting you through this and actually despises you. And I think that's really interesting. So as we go through these, the energy I feel at 20 or a person would feel at 20 is shame. And you walk around in shame. And the emotion, like Hilary said, the humiliation, just always humiliated, and you're miserable all the time. That's your life view. That's just the way life is. It's a miserable place, and God despises me. So we're going to go through each of those on each number and see where you're at. Because I think, as we mentioned, at different times you can be on these different
Mhm.
levels and get there. It's how
And
fast you can get out of them and get back to your balance and keep working to get better.
and sometimes you're working through one of them to get to the next, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So,
So now that was 20. So if you live at a 20 frequency, that's what it is. If you live at a 30 frequency, then you're moving on that scale and your frequency is guilt. That's what the 30 is. Your emotion that you feel is blaming. You're blaming everyone for everything
everyone or yourself
or
as well.
yourself. That's
Like,
true. That's a
yeah.
really good point.
Yeah.
And life view is life is evil. Like it's evil. Like the second we get here, it's evil place. It's an evil world, and God's vindictive. That's your God view is a vindictive God, and people go through life, and then there's a lot of people that believe that live in guilt and blame, and that life's evil and God's vindictive, and that's the frequency. That's the 30.
Mhm. And then we go into 50, which equals despair and apathy. The emotion is depression.
Mhm.
And then the life view is that life is hopeless and God is condemning.
Yeah, and you can see different people at different times in their life go through that, and especially the next one, which is a 75, which is grief, and we all go through grief at different times.
Right.
Again, you're going to go to that frequency.
I love the emotion that he shares that is attached to grief, and it's regret. Like that almost makes me like want to break into tears when I think about um, different people that I've grieved, and I think it is this feeling of things that I didn't
Mm.
do or could have done.
I wish I'd spent
I
more
didn't
time. I
right,
wish I'd have done
exactly,
this. Yeah, and
exactly.
there's so much of that, I think, in every situation. And there's a time and season for everything. So there's a time to feel grief and maybe that little bit of that, dang, I could be a better person. I regret not doing this. So it's not saying it's a bad thing, but you don't want to live at that level of a
Right.
frequency because the life view is tragic. Everything is happens as a tragic event in my
Right.
life, and God is just disdainful, right?
Mhm.
And I think that if you give an example, if you lived at 75 frequency, that's when tragic things happen to you all the time or to your loved ones. And it's always, but if you talk to people where that happens a lot of times it is a woe is me attitude.
Right.
Like they're like, yeah, if it happens, it can happen to me. And it does. It's
Yeah, and
because
those
they're
are kind
attracting
of
it.
the words. Those are the words that are used.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's they're living, their thermostat is set at 75. So it keeps happening over and over and over again. They might come up a little bit or, a higher number than that, but they're going to come back. And so a lot of people live at 75 and you can kind of pick that out. And then there's the 100.
Yeah, 100 is fear. That's the frequency. The frequency is fear. Uh, the emotion is anxiety. You feel anxious, constantly worried about the outcome, right?
Yep.
The life view is life is scary. Life is frightening.
Mm.
It's scary to step outside and do anything. And then the God view is punitive.
And so what do you think about that? I think a lot of people live in that.
Oh yeah, I think it's easy, or maybe the word isn't easy, but it's anytime we do something that is different or outside of our schedule or our norm,
Mhm.
it feels a little scary to do it. And I think we've talked a lot about changing the word fear or scarcity or scared to it's exciting,
Yeah.
and it's just a mindset,
It's just a frequency.
just a frequency.
Well, and you look at people that have a lot of fear and the anxiety comes along with it. Um, and it is this, it's not so much the lower level of tragic life, but it's frightening. And if you stay in that too long, you go down a level. So you'll
Right.
go down to that tragic and have those events happen
Yeah, what I
in
really
your life.
okay, we'll keep going.
So next one's 125. So we're 125 now. Remember, started at 20. And this one is a frequency of desire. Now, what's interesting is the emotion is craving, and I use craving a lot, right? Like whatever you
Yeah,
crave
when
the
I
most,
heard this, I was like, you better change your terms.
whatever you crave the most, you get that type thing. I use the word craving for what you truly want to accomplish in life. This is using the craving for the things that aren't necessarily good. It's just like alter life. I'm just going to go to things I crave, and just you're not going
Yeah,
to
well, I
put
think
a
that's
a
kind of
topic to as far as good or bad.
I think that's the point with the frequency of desire. Desire is more of a selfish want than, like a loving experience or doing something out of love. Love and desire are different.
Absolutely. And the life view is disappointing, and God view is denial. Right?
I'm
That
not
you
sure that I understand that.
basically denial means that you're not sure God exists.
Mm,
And you know what? It's just out there, and we're just when we die, we die. And a lot of people go to that when they're in this frequency because they're like, yes, I desire this, I crave this, and they want it for themselves, and they're wanting it for the wrong reason. They want it for them and just for them, not necessarily to do good. And then having that attitude leads to disappointment, right? That's the life view. And so life's just disappointing. Every time I try something and I do it, it just comes back and, throws me a curveball, and it just doesn't work out. I don't really know if there's a God, right? It's just denial,
right.
right?
Well, I find it interesting that above desire is hate.
Mhm.
So at 150 is hate. That's the frequency. The frequency is hate.
So why is that a higher frequency? We'll get
Okay. And then
it.
the emotion that comes with that is anger. The life view is antagonistic, right? Like life is out to get me,
Mhm.
like it's antagonistic. And then the God view is vengeful, a vengeful God.
And a lot of people that will run off of the vengeful, the reason this number, like 150 is hate, and yet 125 is desire, if you're like, why in the world is this up or higher on the hierarchy as far as frequencies, is because there's times when people can use, hate's a hard word, but anger actually to fuel them. And it might be anger at themselves for how they've lived, right? And
It's
they can do
interesting
that,
though
and
to
it
me.
and it creates movement, because usually at 150 it's a movement number. It's a frequency that
Okay.
creates movement, and it can go down the movement because of how you act on it, or it can go
But
to a
isn't it
higher.
interesting that desire is below hate?
Mhm.
It's like one to give some thought to,
It is,
right?
absolutely. And so, but now once we get through that hate, because most of the times people don't stay in hate, and you're going to move to a lower frequency or a higher frequency from hate. The next one up is 175, and that's pride.
Yeah. So the frequency is pride. The emotion that comes with pride is scorn. The life view is that life is demanding. There's all
Mhm.
these demands on us. And then the God view is indifferent.
I believe there's a God, but doesn't really care what I do.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right, that type thing. And again, hate and pride, the 150, the 175s, the lectures that I've heard of this, and I believe it, I've seen it, I felt it. are movement frequencies. Very few people stay within those. They'll move to a higher frequency from that and do great, and sometimes get back to that and screw up again, or they'll move down and then it just gets this spiral. But once we get above pride, then we hit numbers that are really, you can see a change. And you can see that change in people when they hit a higher frequency of about a 200 or above. And well, you're going to start thinking of people and say, oh gosh, yes, they do live at a higher level of frequency and of love in the world. And that's courage. 200 is courage.
This is the one that elicited so much emotion as I was listening to it. But yeah, so 200, the frequency is courage. And I love that. I think I love that so much because I've experienced so many times in my life when courage has been necessary
Mhm.
and had to address something, and it took all of the courage that I could possibly muster, right? Or that you could possibly muster. So I love courage, and I love the following that comes after courage. It's really cool. And I love that because we're not quite courageous until we get rid of our pride. I think sometimes pride keeps us from being courageous because in pride we're so concerned and worried about what people think of us,
Yeah.
right? So once we no longer care about man's view on us, we move into courage, and we're willing to put it out there and be okay to be judged, right? So
That's it.
so the emotion is affirmation,
Yeah.
the life view is feasible, and then the God view is permitting.
And that's a big shift
It's
on
a
the
huge
God view
shift.
because
It's a
he
huge
permits me
shift.
to accomplish the things that I'm wanting to try to accomplish. And that support at least is there. He's permitting it. And the one of my mentors said, Doug, what you want to do in life, um, his name was Harry Russell, and he said, what you want to do is you want to get to a point to where your thermostat, your lowest level that you allow yourself to get to is courage. If you could have that be the low level, that you never go below that,
That's cool.
you're going to have a happy life. And I thought about that a lot. I said, yeah, but at times we got to go to grief. And he said, no, not necessarily. You can go to courage and those deep, dark times of like, okay, it's time to be strong. It's trying to be strong for my family and to do things and have courage to move on. And so it's a different level of grief. Courage is a different level. But he says, if that's your floor, and you go with courage and like I've got to speak to myself, not listen to myself, right? I've got to speak
You
affirmations,
and
and
get to
I
speak
get to
it.
speak, yeah, and it's feasible. Like, we can do this, and God's gonna, permit it. Yeah, but I've got to do the work type thing.
I get to
That
do.
should be the bottom, right? I get to. I love you, and so think about all of the things before that: the shame, the guilt, the despair, the grief, the fear, the desire, the hate, the pride, of being able to eliminate those in your life. And at the bottom is just courage. Oh, that happened. I will have the courage to get by it.
Yeah, I really like that. I'm gonna jump way back down for a second and go back to shame really quick because he referenced something in that when he was talking about shame, and he says if you're raising your children in shame,
Mm.
and I think back of how many times when we were raising our kids did I try to make them feel shame or guilt for not doing something instead of explaining it thoroughly and then allowing them to make a decision that isn't based on shame or guilt, that's based more in love or courage or, and so I really, really liked that analogy because it makes it very personal. So
No, I
anyways,
like that. And what's interesting, like in the locker rooms in professional sports and stuff, there's this level of playing that's almost a shaming, a humiliation thing. But um, if you knew what went on in there, the talk that happens, most of the world would be offended. But because everyone in there is on a certain frequency and level, it's like a game to them. Like, you or this or that. And you just, anyways, I don't even to repeat it, but the point is that they're doing this, but they're amongst everyone in there that they know no one's at a 20. They're not, and so they kind of play with that. Um, Mini miss like I'm gonna stomp you today, that type thing. And
I do think you have to be
and
kind of careful with
you
that
do
though.
have to be careful. But what it is in there is they take it and they're able to use that and it comes back up to a courage. But it's important to know the point I wanted to make is important to know your room. be able to, the people you're around, you have to respect where people are at with their frequency so that you can speak to them and not have them feel humiliated or bad or that you're better than them or anything like that, and
Yeah,
try to help them. And the higher you go in your frequency, the better in tune you'll be to be able to help people with that. And so, what comes after courage at 200?
I think something I'm going to go back again and then we'll jump ahead. But I think something that you were always very good at when the kids were young and maybe they were being a little bit we took as disrespectful. I wanted to like immediately and you just would hold it and you were good about, okay, we'll talk about it later. And you never tried to make them feel humiliated in front of other people. You always wanted to maintain, their frequency. So I think that's cool. Okay, so courage is 200. And then once we get through courage, we're at 250 with trust and neutrality.
Neutrality.
So being neutral.
Mhm.
Isn't that interesting that neutral is higher?
It's very high. Well, and it's even in every scale on the planet, like even in the nutrition world, you have a scale of acidity, and neutral's in the
Cool.
middle, right?
Yeah.
And so at a 7, and so it's really interesting. But yeah, it's definitely a much higher plane than most of them, and that's a great place to be, is trust and neutrality.
Yeah, I think that's one, I'm always bouncing back and forth between frequencies, probably more than most. Sorry about that. Sorry about your luck. But I I have been trying to learn to feel an emotion and to allow it to settle and become neutral before any reaction.
And what is the emotion to that one?
What?
What's the
Oh,
emotion?
to it's like, what are you talking about? To trust?
Yeah,
Yeah, the emotion is acceptance.
acceptance.
Yeah.
And I think that's really big, and that leads to the life view that it's satisfactory,
Yeah, the
right?
life view is that it's satisfactory.
And that God's enabling, not just permitting, but enabling. He enables us to be able to accomplish what we want if we're going to put the work in. And 250 is not a bad place. The life view is satisfactory. A lot of people look at that as negative, and that's not true. That means that life's good, but it's a place that a lot of good people live, and there's nothing wrong with that their whole life. But there are greater levels of happiness and enjoyment and fulfillment, especially because we're created at a higher frequency. We have that potential to hit that. And that's where many times I think that the opposite of the light and the frequency, the negative, whatever you want to call that, if you want to call it the devil or just lower frequencies, whatever you want to call it, that instead of like getting you to go and rob a bank or do something really bad type situation, that you wouldn't do, right? Instead, it's like, you know what? Let's just keep that neutral feeling. Let's just stay there. You're a good person, but you're not going to cause change in the world. And sometimes the adversary wins by not tearing you down, it just by keeping you in the norm.
Yeah, being warm, neither
Absolutely.
cold nor hot.
They're cold and hot,
Okay, so then we go to 310, which is the frequency is willingness and the emotion is optimism,
which is great.
which is great. And then the life view is hopeful. You're hopeful. You know that there's a chance that things are going to be great. There's possibility. And then the God view is that God is inspiring.
Yeah, and that's huge. And I think, a lot of people, when you ask them what's one of the greatest things in the world when things happen, is hope. There's always hope. No matter what, there's always hope. That tells you what frequency they're at, right? That's a great place to be at 310. That God's inspiring is also a great place. That's finally when you accept that there's a higher being that can help you and is inspiring and that is perfect, or is the greater, and it inspires you to do better, and through that. And that's a great place to be. And so 350 is acceptance, the emotions forgiveness, and again, a lot of times that's a tough one, right?
Yeah, that
And you
can
go
be a
in and
tough
out of
one.
that.
Yeah.
And the life view is harmonious, which I love. I love the concept of harmonious, because when you're fighting a battle like we do on our business side, right? The fight against the Great American Food Fund, that's a fight, it's a war. How can you be harmonious with that? Well, I think that for me, it's about being harmonious in something that will create more happiness and more health. and that's what we're harmonious in. But to do that, we are going to have to be in a fight many times, and that God's merciful, that he knows we'll make mistakes. And there's a big difference between being inspired by someone. I can be inspired by someone, but I know that they're not merciful. like I'm inspired to do my job, but I know if I don't, I'm in deep trouble type thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, so some people coach.
Yeah.
But there's a difference when if I'm inspired, plus I know that person's going to be merciful, right? And as parents, that's what we try to be. We hopefully our kids know that we're going to help them through. We're not going to be happy. We're not going to like them at the moment, but we'll always love them. And I think that's my take on merciful, that
Okay.
type of situation.
I like it. And then where on the scale did he say that, few people get here, even fewer get here? I can't
Yeah.
quite remember. Can you remember
Yeah,
where it is?
yeah, absolutely. So 400 and above, people can get to 400 to 500 that we're going to go into right now, but most people don't stay there, and very few go above that. So where
Okay,
we're going
so
right now is that a lot of people get to at points in their life if they're just really striving to be a good person and make a good change in the world in whatever area it is. And so let's go there. And then
okay, so 400, the frequency is reason,
reason.
and then the emotion that goes with it is understanding,
Mhm.
and the life view is that life is meaningful. There's meaning here. And then that God is wise. The view is that God is wise.
Yeah. And that's a beautiful place because meaningful brings in that you believe you have a purpose and that there's some reason why we're here. And so that gives a drive above the norm. It gives a drive of, I believe I was created for a reason and it's meaningful. And I really want to find out what that is. And I want to strive to help myself, my family, mankind.
And I think at this, at a lot at this frequency, at reason, is where, regardless of what I go through, I know that God will make it for my good. It will be for my ultimate good. And so I think that's kind of where that comes in.
Let's stay there for 1 second because that's so beautiful. That's why I think when, the great ancients, we talk about Wayne Dyer putting this together, but we're talking always back to Socrates, Egyptians. Biblically, David talked about it, Solomon, the wisest man ever, and obviously the Savior, and that talked about it. Muhammad talked about it, about frequencies and levels, and they might have used different words, but coming to once you hit this 400 that God is wise that you just mentioned, that was one of the hardest things in life, I think, is that no matter what happens, it is for my good. And sometimes things happen that was meant to be because you set a goal and the world, God, whatever you wanted to say it, knew that you wouldn't be strong enough if you were given that. And so you have to be stronger. You have to lift the weights. You have to have the trials. And other times things just happen, but it still can be to your good if you have that frequency and that
if you
mindset.
believe it.
If you believe it.
If you believe it can be for your good, it will.
Absolutely. So that's the 400. Then we
Okay.
get right up to 500.
Okay, so 500 is love. That is the frequency of love. I think people can think of different people that they've just felt pure love from. I often think about your mom with love, and especially when she would talk about the grandkids. They could be being the naughtiest little things, and all she had was love. And her advice was, when if I was going through something with one of the kids, was just love them. That was her advice, and I used to get so angry at that advice. But it's brilliant. It's inspired. So the frequency is love. The emotion is reverence. The life view is that life is benign. And the God view is that God is loving.
That God is love. And a lot of people get to that point where like, hey, God's love. That's where they're at that frequency, at least at that state of believing in a higher being. And I think that the reverence thing is really big on the emotion because it creates the ability of when you have a reverence emotion, you don't react either way quickly. It's a reverence for life, and that, like you said, like Mom would say, they're just going through that, and that you love them, and it's tough to do. That's why people will bump up into the 400 or 500 once in a while, but very few in history have stayed at that or higher. And the next one above that is 540, which is joy, and the emotion serenity. The life view is life is complete, and God view is all is one. And the joy is great because if you're a believer in the scriptures or even some of the other writings of prophets from other religions and stuff, Muhammad and that, is we're here that to have joy, that life is about joy. And if you take that from a frequency standpoint, is life's about being at least at that 540 if we're talking and like today in frequency and numbers. Um, and if you can live in that joy, it is a place of serenity. It's a life's complete and all is one, that we're all created here, as one. And it's a respect for life. And that's a great place. I think we've all experienced joy. Most people have experienced joy at some time in their life, but to be able to maintain that is something really tough,
Oh, 100%.
and I've heard people try to give names of people at different levels where they've lived, at least for quite a while at a level, so you could try to, show that. And one person was talking about the life of Gandhi and said there was a point when Gandhi became joy when he hit the 540 mark, and just talked about how he acted and reacted to people
Mhm.
about being thrown in jail, and how the wisdom that came from him when people would talk to him changed because his frequency changed. He finally accepted that whatever's going to happen is going to happen. My mission's most important, and I'm going to share that with love. And he was at that point, and he actually got to, I think, a little higher level, but that is the 600.
Yeah, so 600 is the frequency is peace. The emotion is bliss. That's crazy. That life is perfect is the view, and then that God view is that all being.
Yeah. And bliss isn't something that everyone gets to in life as an experience. I think we all experience joy at different times, but
Yeah,
bliss is a
bliss is
different
different.
level.
Yeah.
And why we're so big on the nutrition and the health side of things is that my belief, our belief is that if you're in a state of joy, of bliss, of happiness, you're making decisions differently and you're proactive. And if you want to control someone, you don't want them in a state of bliss and higher level happiness. You want them in the state more back at just being able to acceptance type situation. And you're not in a place, there's a little anxiety. You're not in this place of bliss and happiness. And it's easier to control people at that lower frequency. And so the foods, the chemicals in the foods,
Mm.
everything that's out there today is to keep us at lower level because it's easier to be controlled. It's easier to be like, do this. And you just go about it and do those things without thought and without questioning and seeing, is this really for the betterment? And so the frequency is peace. And you'll know through history people that were about peace, you
Mm.
know. And peace doesn't mean you lay down and do nothing either. Peace means that that's what you're about, and you will go about working to get peace the best way possible, godlike manner. But there's times when people that are peaceful, like the Savior and different things, would speak hard
Mm.
truths to people, but still was it about peace. And then the final,
So the final frequency is 700 to 1,000, and that is enlightenment. The emotion is ineffable, and the life view is everything is, and the God view is self.
what do we think the God view of self is?
Oh, why don't you share?
Well, I think that if you look through history and people been actually killed for this, right? But they say, "I am God," but they're not saying they are the others. That I'm God. That God made me. I am God. I'm a part of God. We I'm one. I'm self, and I have the ability to attain some of those same characteristics and benefits, and that because that's my Father. And people have been ridiculed and, like I said, killed because of those views. And but that's the highest level. That's the highest level, that you're one with God, and He wants that. He wants the best for you, and He'd want to share with Him. And a lot of people get really riled up with that. And so we're just reporting what the frequencies are. I do personally believe that, but uh, if you want to look at history, there was only one person that we know of, and I haven't studied as deep into the other, Muhammad and a lot of those. So there might be there too, but I know just because of our Christian background that Jesus was the one that if you're going to put a person to a number was at that because he had always spoke that, right? me and the Father are one. And he would always talk like that. But that's because he was speaking from his frequency and that level. So understanding where people are speaking from, when I hear someone speak now and they're at a much higher frequency than I am, it's not one of they thinking they're better than me or anything like that. It's like, wow, they're at that frequency and it's inspiring. But the lower the frequency you are, if you are around people at too high of a gap above that frequency or higher on that scale, right? Then many times it can cause more anger because you think that they're saying they're better than you or things like that. And it's very important to make sure that you take things a step at a time. That if you're at a certain level and you said, hey, you know what, I do operate right here at this number, whatever it might be, right? 200, 250, 20, whatever it is that we say we're at. And just look at the next level and start working to be a little bit better each day. If I try to hang around those 5 people that are at a little bit different level, and I'll let you close out from a business standpoint. I heard something really cool the other day. This guy was saying, everyone needs to get in the room. You need to get in mastermind groups to better yourself, whether it be for marriages or business and that. This was a business group though. He says, look, if you're wanting to become a millionaire, then you want to get in a group that people are just millionaires. You don't want to get in a room with billionaires. That's too big of a jump. And it'll probably mess you up. You want to go to that next level of frequency and feel that and like, oh, that's possible. And I make these adjustments in my way I look at things and what I do and make that. And I thought that was really cool. It's incremental, right? A step at a time and crawl before you walk type thing. And I think that's a really great place. A lot of times we are around the ultimate level of something and we think that's just too far, it's too hard. And it might be at the moment. Right. But that's why we need to be careful.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's too why we explain when people are trying to make changes in their lifestyle and health and fitness, to make small changes and choices, and those will start compounding, and then you'll be able to, bite off a little bit more each time. So
I love that. And you're a great example. We'll close how we started, and that is, Hilary won the Olympia, right, in the Master Division and in classic figure. But we were reminiscing that 8 years ago,
10 years ago.
So 10 years ago, she took 17th, and right out of like 17, so 18. And but you didn't try to win the Olympia next year. You wanted to improve until you got to that point. And anytime you tried to make too big of a jump mentally, right, it would tear you down. And then once you started getting that incremental growth mindset and being okay with that and the expectations, it was really great. So we will put this, we typed up these numbers and made it hopefully easy to understand in a cool little format. We will attach these to this show so that you'll be able to download those, and we'd love to hear your comments. This is a very different show, but we try to live our life off frequencies and energy and work to improve ours and be respectful to where other people are at to try to communicate and relate, with them. And I think it just make a better world the more we know.
We need that little more, like that. Is that showing my age?
I like it.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
Well, maybe it's showing your age.
What? Tell me.
It was like on like PBS or something. It was like this little, somebody will know what I'm talking about. Like this little star would come up and then go, the more you know.
Awesome. Cool.
You can delete this off. Anyways, thanks for joining us. And
as always, this is Miss Natural Olympia Hilary.
And this is Doug the Formulator.
Like the show. Click the link. Talk to you soon. Keep chewing.